Mass Effect Andromeda, the game that killed Mass Effect franchise. But was it actually that bad that all of us remember? Well, I decided to pick the game up again and decided to go through it from the beginning to an end once again, just to go and realize whether it is actually worth it to purchase in 2020 or not. And by the way, the game is actually available on Steam as well, which is pretty low price, and I was really interested to decide whether the game is actually worth to pick up in 2020, 3 years later after a disaster launch or not. So let's find out whether the Mass Effect Andromeda is worth it in 2020. So let me give you a little bit of history, what actually happened with me and Mass Effect Andromeda, entirety of the Mass Effect trilogy as well. So Mass Effect Andromeda was a big hype for me. This is probably one of the biggest hypes because I just loved Mass Effect trilogy. I loved it so much because it was really, really great. Of course, there was a lot of flaws. It was a really, really, really flawed trilogy, but it was still great. And I was in love with the universe of the Mass Effect, and I wanted to feel the Mass Effect universe once again. And I was hyped beyond the measures in 2017, back when game was supposed to come out, when it actually came out. And it was only one of the 2 games that I ever pre-ordered. The first one was The Witcher 3, and the second one was the Mass Effect Andromeda. And after that, I was never pre-ordering games ever, and you should never do this as well, because this game was clear indication why you should never ever pre-order the games. I was really, really hyped. I was so hyped that I even purchased Origin Access, which was very new back then, and which allowed you to play the game the few days before the game came out. I was very hyped and I was very excited. And when I played the game, well, the hype really died out really, really fast. But a few weeks ago, I decided to pick up the game and find out what actually happened, what actually was that bad with the game, because back then I was not looking at the games the same way I am looking at right now. So I was really interested in what actually killed Mass Effect franchise. What was the reason? Was it really the game? Was the game really that bad? Was the publishers, EA's fault, or was it our fault, the fault of the gamers? So a bit of a background about me and about the worst game of the franchise before the Andromeda. What majority of the people are thinking was the Mass Effect 3. I actually liked Mass Effect 3. Not the ending though. I always pretended the ending doesn't exist, like completely doesn't exist. I always pretended the game just ended the moment when the Reaper battle started and we started landing on Earth. That's it. I pretended nothing else existed because it was utter trash. There is no denying that the ending of the Mass Effect 3 was complete trash. I really, really hated it. Extended Cut made it a bit better, but still, it was really, really bad. Before that, I liked the game. I in no way, shape, or form thought that game was actually perfect. It was not perfect. It was very far from perfect. It was a very flawed game, but it was a very good game nonetheless. It was not an awful piece of trash like many people are saying, but it was still good enough for me. I really liked it and I really enjoyed the moments, the playing of Mass Effect 3, and I really wanted to feel the game, the Mass Effect universe in the same way again. Well, I knew that there was something to be... I remember a lot of things about Mass Effect Andromeda. I remember the graphical glitches, the problems. I know that a lot of them were fixed, but I wanted the game to be as perfect as possible from the get-go, so I decided to use the mod. I used a lot of mods from the Nexus page of the Mass Effect Andromeda, and I will be including the link of the mod pack that I used in the description down below, and it actually made the game really, really good. Well, comparatively speaking, of course, compared to what it was. It fixed a lot of the graphical issues, it fixed a lot of bugs, and I actually fixed a lot of gameplays with the weapon balances, with the squad AI, etc, etc. Squad was not completely useless this time, and it was very, very good. And well, let's decide it. Well, let's just start talking about the Mass Effect Andromeda, whether it's actually good or not. Enough with an intro. It was a very long intro, but now let's talk about the game itself. Now let's start with the talking of the good parts of the game. So first is the combat, because combat is the very big part of the gameplay, and you will be fighting a lot in this game, like a lot. And plus, because I installed an increased spawn rates for remnants, for outlaws, and for the Kett, I was fighting constantly. And with the mods and with the core gameplay as well, the combat is really, really fun. It's probably the most fun part of the game. The combat is fluid, the combat is fast, and most importantly, it is vertical, unlike any other previous parts of the Mass Effect. With the usage of jetpack and the usage of the evade ability, which is basically a middle mouse button on the PC, which will allow you evade, and depending on the profiles that you use, which is completely different thing. Profiles are like the classes that you can switch on the fly, including within abilities. You are gaining a lot of movability and compatibility that was not available in any other previous Mass Effect games, and it was simply stunning and amazing. It was very, very good. Using a soldier profile 1 second, then switch it to the biotic profile in a second, and then going to the tech profile in the third, and then in the last of the fight, mixing all of them together was completely exhilarating, and I loved it. Plus, the game was not difficult, especially with the mods. I was playing actually on normal. I was not playing on difficult. It was not difficult. It was kinda challenging, but not much, and I felt like that I should have upped the difficulty as soon as I felt like the game was not that difficult enough. Even though it was still fun, I managed to only die only few times during the entire game, and none of the times was it because of the game difficulty. It was of my stupidity, because when there are like one of the ending battles and you charge like in the middle of the dozens of the enemies, yeah, you are going to die no matter what difficulty you're playing. So yeah, it was mainly my problem. Overall, the combat was pretty fun, and I really could recommend the game only because of the combat as well, which very perfectly transitions into multiplayer. Even though we're not going to talk about the multiplayer in this video, still it was pretty good. Nomad and exploration, it was okay. I really liked the Nomad. If you like the Mako in the first Mass Effect, you will love the Nomad. It's not as cartoony as it was in the Mass Effect 1. It's still pretty good. It's a very capable vehicle, and the exploration with the Nomad is very fun. Even though you don't have any combat abilities with the Nomad because you don't have any guns on the Nomad, it was still pretty good, and depending on the planets that you're playing on, it was pretty good. The most awful exploration on the Nomad, probably the worst one, was on Eos, the first planet that you will unlock. It was probably the worst one because the planet itself was pretty boring. There is not much, but as soon as you will go to the different planets, I don't remember exactly the names of the planets, like the Vold, the snow planet, Elara I think was the desert planet. It was unlocking very well, and the gameplay and exploration with the Nomad was pretty fun. Especially I loved the exploration on the asteroid. I don't remember the name because it was actually a lot of numbers in the name, but because of the low gravity, and it was an asteroid, low gravity, no atmosphere, you could not leave the ship. The Nomad, all you were playing is on the Nomad, except when you enter the buildings or domes as they were called there. The gameplay was very reminiscent to the Mass Effect 1. It was very good, and to compare to anything, I don't know, in the movie culture, probably you would feel like the same way as in the movie Armageddon. If you remember, there was a part where the main heroes were driving with something like a Nomad on an asteroid. It was something of a reminiscent of this, and it was pretty fun. Overall, exploration was pretty good because you are finding a lot of great spots, and the movement is very cool, but I would say that it is becoming boring rather fast. Not as fast as in the Mass Effect 1, but after a few hours, you will not want to drive that much. If you like driving mechanics, if you like the driving games, if you like the car games, you will still probably love the exploration far more than I do, because you will probably drive for far longer because of how great the Nomad is in its handling. But overall, yeah, maybe it will becoming boring faster than the combat will. And speaking of the exploration and planets, the third biggest part is the beauty of the planets. Planets look beautiful, and this is probably the biggest plus of the game, because the game looks stunning. If you don't look at the faces of the characters, overall game looks simply amazing. It looks simply stunning. The planet looks amazing. They are different. They are cool. The desert looking completely different to the snowy planet. The asteroid looks completely different to anything. The Havarl, which is probably one of the only few planets where you cannot drive with a Nomad, looks amazing, which is a jungle planet, looks simply stunningly beautiful, which probably looks more like a Pandora from an Avatar, and gives it a very cool alien look. You will simply love the game, and which is very amazing. The game was running very smoothly. I don't have the very most powerful rig. I'm running GTX 980, which was a pretty capable graphics card when the game came out, but still nowadays it's not that powerful. But still, game was running very well, even with the few dozen mods installed. I didn't have any crash. I had only minor glitches and bugs, and it was probably because of the game, not because of the graphics or engine or because of my graphics card. And overall, it was running just simply beautiful. beautiful and very, very stable. Okay, let's now talk about smaller things that was similar to the other Mass Effect games. The planetary readiness, the galaxy readiness basically transferred into this game as well. If you remember, in Mass Effect 3, you were gathering the resources in order to fight Reapers. Here, what you're doing, you're gathering the resources to make Andromeda more viable and livable. You, instead of Mass Effect readiness, galaxy readiness, you are doing collecting AVP points, which are Andromeda Viability points, which is how can I say, practically useless. This is just a indication of how complete your game is and how much additional perks you can gain, like how many cryopods you can unlock, which basically give you some additional perks, like giving you additional materials from now and then, giving you additional credits from now and then, giving you like more XP and etc, etc. There's not a big impact if you will not do anything. Like, I actually did a very little part. I only unlocked few planets on 100% viability and like didn't do any viability at all on 2 planets, or sorry, on 1 planet, and do like very little viability on 1 planet, but still I was doing pretty well. It did not affect ending too much, and I will be talking about the ending in a bit, and it's okay to have, but it does not have practically any effect on the main story at all, unlike the Mass Effect 3-1, where the galaxy readiness would actually decide how good or bad your ending would be, and like how the character would survive or not. Like, it was pretty big impacts in Mass Effect 3, but here it is like completely non-existent. Okay, let's now talk about the game itself. So when you play the game, I'll try to go with as little spoilers as possible, even though it's been 3 years, but still you may want to pick up the game, so I'll not go with the very major spoilers, probably like maybe a little bit of hinting at very minor spoilers. The game looks and feels, when you start the game, I'll probably spoil the first few minutes. When you start the game, it feels very close to Mass Effect 1. If you remember Mass Effect 1, the first mission was on Eden Prime. When you landed there, you just go and like explore like some new species, which are not species, the new enemies, which are husks, and go and discover different things, and then in the end you go and discover your main villain, Saren, which was not a main villain but one of the main villains. Here, it is very similar. You land on a planet, which was supposed to be a like habitat for your Andromeda initiative. You land on a planet, everything goes to crap. You discover a new alien species, you fight, and you find out not the main villain, but you find out you meet the main MacGuffin device of the game, which are the vaults of the Remnant. And you actually see the main villain as well, but you actually do not confront him directly. It's very close and very different from the Mass Effect 2 beginning and Mass Effect 3 beginning. Remember, the Mass Effect 2 beginning was the meeting with the collectors and the death of Shepard, which was like completely different, probably the best beginning, and still Mass Effect 2 is the best Mass Effect game, period. And Mass Effect 3 was kinda like the same, but you actually jump into the heat of a battle by Reapers attacking, which was a bit different as well. I will draw many comparisons with Mass Effect 1 because this game is literally Mass Effect 1 redone, but the beginning just cemented it for me like once again. It feels exactly like Mass Effect 1. Play Mass Effect 1 once again if you want, and you'll probably have a chance with the imminent coming of the Mass Effect Remastered, but it feels exactly like first Mass Effect, and I kinda wanted to like it, but I didn't want the same game, and I still completely ignored this, and I decided, okay, maybe something good will happen as we continue. As you continue the game, as you play the game, you will realize one thing very quickly. Game is very quiet, especially when you land on Hyperion, the main arc of the humanity, and on the Nexus. The game is dead silent all the time. It's eerie because there's a very little background noise, very little. Even on the previous Mass Effects, for example, when you are on the Citadel, which is the equivalent of the Nexus in this game, it was all the background sound, like people are doing stuff, people are moving, etc. Here it is dead silent. There is no background music, there is no ambient music, there is very little ambient sound, and it makes you feel like very bored very quickly, especially because of the dialogues and because of the main story is pretty boring, especially in the beginning. You would want to jump out of the game really quickly, and now I realize that back in 2017 when I actually did this was one of the reasons when I jumped off of the game, because I was bored. It is that boring, and you realize how eerily silent the game is. It's very, very bad. And okay, if you chew through the main story and just finally unlock your main ship, your first ship, which is the Tempest, which is the exact copy of the Normandy, but with, as far as I understand, it's a Solarian design mixed with a human design and the Turian as well, which Normandy was I think the human and the Turian design. Here it's a mix of all designs. Ship looks cool. Ship looks very fine. It looks very, very similar to Normandy, but it looks pretty good. But when you jump on a ship, the Tempest does not feel personal. It does not feel that good. Tempest feels like very empty, and especially when you don't have any crew. Entirety of the Tempest are only few people, and I can name them all. It is the pilot, it is the second pilot, it is engineer, and it is a doctor, and you plus 2 of your party members. That's it. Entirety of the ship, the Pathfinder ship, that is supposed to be very important ship for the entire game, is filled with only 7 people, including you. And ship is huge. Ship is ginormous. And through the entire game, you will gain only 4 more people. 11 people into the ship of this size, which is the frigate size, as far as I understand. You imagine the 11 people on a ship. This is not a fishing ship. This is the Pathfinder ship. Everyone is doing this, like 11 people is doing everything on the ship. What the hell? Like the ship feels unbelievably empty and boring, and there's nothing. Even in the Normandy, you had a crew that people were just standing around. Especially in the first Normandy, people were standing around, do their job, like navigation or something like that. You could not interact with them. You had even a cook on the Normandy too, as far as I remember. But here, the ship is dead. There is nothing on the ship. Like, it's unbelievably empty. I rarely ever want to explore the ship because it's dead. Tempest is dead. And what's most weird, nobody has any respect to you on the ship. Literally, nobody have any respect to you. Nobody cares about you. You're the Pathfinder. You're the captain of the ship. Who cares? Everybody's talking to you like they're old pal of yours, or some guy who just promoted and nobody cares about you. And like, oh yeah, you fail. Who cares about you? Screw you. The old Pathfinder was cool guy. You are nobody. Everybody's treating you like that from the beginning of the game till the very end. Nobody really respects you. I know that you need to earn the respect, etc., but your ship at least could give you a little bit of a damn about you. You do a lot of great things, but they're still talking to you like the buddy, your old classmate who has supposed to have a cafe or something, and you're just chilling out in their cafe and asking for the free drinks. Nobody respects you. Nobody cares about you. It's like very huge contrast to Shepard, which was a real presence. And more you play this game, more you realize why nobody respects you. Because you're not respectable. Ryder, especially the main Ryder, is not the serious person at all. No matter how hard he tries, he's not a respectable person. He's just a boy who got promoted to the Pathfinder and got an AI into his head. Like, that's it. He's just a boy who were handed the power by his father. That's all that he is through an entire game. He's not respectable through an entire game. Nobody gives a damn about him. And to be fair, I myself, the person who plays with him, does not give a damn about him as well. I have zero respect to Ryder, no matter what he did. He feels like a kid with a really good heart, but he's not a leader. He's not Shepard, like in no way, shape, or form. And as you continue playing the game, you feel like it's not a grand space opera like the Mass Effect main trilogy was. There is no grandeur to anything. You are just going from place to place, doing the stuff, talking to people, going back to ship, upgrading, going back, exploring with the Nomad, doing the things. There's no grandeur to anything. And entirety of the Helios cluster, where the entire game is going, feels very boring as well. And when you meet the main protagonist, I don't know how can I call them, only alien species, Angara, they're as boring as your ship ship is. There's nothing great happening with an Angara, nothing alien happening with them. They're literally the same cookie cutter alien ship. They are exactly looking like the Twi'lek from the Star Wars universe. There's nothing weird or universally different to Angara. There's literally nothing. In the Mass Effect universe, you realize the Turian are the militaristic guys, Asarian are female, blue female guys, Salarian are smart dudes, Krogan are like the brutes that are fighting with anything and everything. Even Protheans are well explored in the Mass Effect universe. Even if you have only one Prothean in one DLC of the Mass Effect 3, they're still far more fleshed out than Angara. They're still very boring and exceptionally boring, and my god, even more boring are the Kett. Damn, the Kett, the main antagonists, are exceptionally boring. You literally find out nothing about them while going through the entire game. Well, you find out some stuff, but that's it. Some stuff, but no motivation, no history, where they come from, what they want. Well, you find out what they want, but why they want it, and why is this happening when they came here? Nothing. You're finding about nothing about the Kett. And this makes the game entirely boring. You go through the game just like that, from mission to mission, finding some stuff, discovering some revelations which was obvious from the first second, and nothing great is happening with this game. Nothing great. It feels exactly like Mass Effect 1 if the Mass Effect 1 was a boring mess. It fixes some stuff of the Mass Effect 1, like the exploration, which is far more interesting than the Mass Effect 1 in here in Andromeda, but it breaks what made Mass Effect 1 great, which was its story and choices. And my god, don't make me start talking about the choices, because there are no choices in the game. The game gives you only the illusion of the choices, but there are no choices in the game. I never seen any choice that had any impact on the game. Literally zero choices in the game. And what about the dialogue, you may ask? Well, you have a lot of dialogue options. No. In the Mass Effect, first, you had a Paragon option, Renegade option, and a Neutral option, usually, and some kind of Investigate option as well, which would take the game in completely different paths. Here, you don't have something like that. Here you have tones option. You can be serious, you can be pragmatic, you can be like very emotional, and they have exactly the same endings. Exactly the same endings. There are no differences there. There is no choice in the game. This game is absolutely linear experience. Only thing that is not linear in the game is whether you want to go through the story from the very beginning or whether you want to finish everything up first. Because if you can finish everything even after you are done with the main story. Because like 95% of the game has literally no connection to the main story. And I'm serious. 95% of the game have literally zero connection to anything happening in the main story. 95%. So main story is only 5% and anything else is the filler content. That's how irrelevant the main story is. And speaking of the main story, I'm gonna have to talk about the ending. I will not spoil again anything, but if you have played Mass Effect 1 from the beginning to an end, and I know I'm comparing this game to the Mass Effect 1, but when you play this game, you will feel why I am doing this. When you go through the ending of the game, it is exact cookie cutter copy of Mass Effect 1 with some kind of mix of something from the Mass Effect 3. Well, I can tell you, this is not a big spoiler. There is a space battle from Mass Effect 3. A bit, like a few seconds of the space battle from the Mass Effect 3. And when you get there, there's literally nothing different happening in the game. There's nothing different that will say, you will say that, okay, this thing is different from the Mass Effect 1. There's practically zero differences from the Mass Effect 1 happening here. It's exactly the same thing. You land on a ship, you land on somewhere. Okay, I'm not gonna spoil again anything. You sit in Nomad, there's a chase scene. If you remember the final run to the Citadel from the Mass Effect 1, there's a chase, you drive a Nomad, and your allies help you, and there's fights, boom, 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 you go, and then you go and fight big bad guy. That's it. That's literally it. That's all about the ending. It's big, it's quick, it's dumb, it's explosion-y, and that's it. There's literally no revelations, no story, no nothing. There are some stuff, but yeah, nothing literally. If we would not do this, we would not show any of this, it would still be exactly the same thing. It's unbelievable unbelievably cliched and boring. It's not great. The main story is not great. And the main villain, oh boy, don't make me start talking about the main villain, which is Archon, the leader of the Kett. The only Kett that can actually talk well. There are actually a few as well, but the leader, the only Kett that actually thinks for himself. Boy, he's boring. He is boring. There is no more boring villain in entire Mass Effect universe than the Kett. Every villain in a Mass Effect universe, every main villain had something behind them. Saren from the first Mass Effect was very good and fleshed out villain. He was straight up the bad guy, but he had the motivations behind him. He had very altruistic motivations behind him. The Collectors from the Mass Effect 2, they were bad guys that had really good motivations behind them. They were basically the Reapers. So you would understand exactly what they're doing. Mass Effect 3, Elusive Man and the Reapers. Reapers that are force of the nature, which was terrifying every time you met them. And an Elusive Man, very fleshed out villain. There is nothing in here like that. There is nothing in here like that. Archon is your cookie cutter bad guy who wants power. That's it. And he will do everything in his strength to gain absolute power over Helios cluster. That's everything about him. That's literally everything. There's nothing more interesting about him. It's unbelievably boring. And when you defeat him, all that you can feel is, so what? Then what? There's literally nothing else that there is about this villain. It's a very, 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 very boring. Now let's talk about the universe they want to establish. Let's talk about the lore that they want to expand with the Mass Effect Andromeda. When I heard that they were moving into the future, like 600 years in the future in the completely different galaxy, I at least hoped that there would be some connections with the main Milky Way galaxy. Nope, there's literally no connections except for the very minor ones to the Milky Way galaxy. There's nothing coming from there. You practically leave before the Reapers arrived, you go and there is nothing connecting to that. There's very small connections. There's still, but not in the main story at least. I really hoped that they would say there would be something about the Reapers maybe, or something about, I didn't know anything, but it seems like there's nothing happening in the Helios cluster. There are literally 3 species in an entire cluster that's supposed to be full of a golden world, and Helios cluster is pretty big. It's a huge cluster. There are a lot of star systems there. Remember the Mass Effect Milky Way universe? It was, the galaxy I mean, it was full of the different species. Here you have Angara, which is the main species here. You have the Kett that they're probably not even native to the Helios cluster, or maybe there are, I don't know, but we didn't explore this. And there are remnants, the ancient, well-developed, like overly developed race that supposedly was only active for the past few thousand years. Only active for the past few thousand years. Don't make me believe that there were nothing happening in an entire Helios cluster in a new galaxy before that. Even Mass Effect main galaxy, Milky Way, says that there were countless of species before Protheans. And you even meet the Leviathans, which was the progenitors of the Reaper species, the ones that created the Reapers. And you wanted to say that there were nothing before that? The Helios cluster feels dead AF. But what about the remnants, okay? Remnants, something to replace Protheans maybe? No, the remnants, which was not explored at all as well, maybe very little in this game, were literally ripped off forerunners from the Halo universe, including their megastructures, their technology. They're literally ripped off forerunners from the Halo universe. That's how boring the remnant were as well. There is very little built in the universe building and very little built in the lore building in the game. And there are literally no connections with the Mass Effect universe. So you want to tell me that in the year 2185, they had technology to map out Andromeda Galaxy in real time without the light lag. Mind you that there are approximately 2 million light year difference, if I'm not wrong. 2 million light year distance from Andromeda Galaxy, and the light has to travel 2 million years in order to get us. You managed to map it out in the real time. They actually explained it, how they actually did it. There is actually something Star Warsy stuff, magic, that they were actually able to do this. They did it in real time, but they could not communicate with the Milky Way galaxy. They did not get any information about what was happening or what happened. the Milky Way galaxy that supposedly survived because there were only one option in the Mass Effect 3 that actually destroyed the entire Milky Way galaxy, and there were no connections, there were no communication efforts from the Milky Way galaxy to the arc that they sent? Really? You really don't want the Mass Effect 3 just happen? You cannot just pretend that Mass Effect games did not happen. You cannot do this. They actually happened. Something happened. You had to establish something there. You cannot pretend that there's nothing happening. I don't know, okay, you may do something that you may choose to ignore the things that happened in the Mass Effect 3 or something in the ending, but something happened right afterwards. You can actually easily do things to completely avoid any player choice because you are doing the game 600 years in the future. 600 years in the future. Whatever you do, you choose in the Mass Effect 3, you can completely ignore. Okay, maybe you choose a control thing. Okay, you can say that, okay, because of the control, the people in 300 years, like in 24, 25, decided to send Reapers away or just store them. Or if you chose a synthesis, the universe decided to still go back to the organic. Or you may not even talk about this, about the synthesis. Or if you choose to destroy, okay, you may not talk about the Reapers at all. You can just say the Reaper War and that's it. Or we won the Reaper War. That's it. You don't even need to talk about whatever actually happened. But no, there is nothing like that. I know I haven't done the game 100%, but the things like that, you don't need to dig into the lore like that to see the things like that. But I'm pretty sure there's nothing like that about the game or about the Milky Way universe. That's very, very bad. I really didn't like the lore building. The game felt incredibly empty. Okay, I know that I'm actually bashing the game left and right, but I have to admit it. If I didn't play this game as a Mass Effect fan, if I played this game like as an individual completely unaware of the Mass Effect universe, this game would not be bad. Yeah, I have to admit this. This game would not be bad. I know more than 30 minutes into the video, I have to admit it, the game would not be bad. The game would be actually pretty okay. The story is not great, but game is still pretty good overall. You can see the game is half-baked. You can see the game had the problems with the development because the things that they are building are not connected to each other. And if there are any connections, they are completely nonsensical and like not irrelevant. And you can see that developers did not build this game for the long time. The game had a really good concept, but the execution is pretty bad. The game is bad by design, not by the ideas. Let me explain what do I mean by that. It feels like the certain parts of the development team were developing the game, but when the time came to connect everything to each other at just a very little, I don't know, like very little dialogues or very little something, they were ran out of time and publisher pushed the game to release. It feels exactly like that. The game is fun to play no matter what. The gameplay is still good enough. If you start the game, if you purchase the game, you will not regret it. The game is still pretty fun because it's not a great Mass Effect game, but it's good game overall. I would bash the game like right and left, but it's the Mass Effect fan would speak inside of me because it's not a just objective gamer. Because objectively, game is not bad, especially with the mods. When you mod the game, when you improve the squads, when you improve the weapons, when you balance the weapons, balance the armor, the game feels pretty good. The combat is pretty interesting. The enemy AI is not that dumb. They actually play pretty well. The game looks pretty good, and if you take the separate elements except for the story, the game is good enough for you to justify the purchase. I know I've been bashing the game for 30 minutes, but that's just because it's not good Mass Effect game, but it's good RPG. There are enough variety in the builds for you to play around and find the playstyle that you want. The enemy variety is not that big, but good enough for you to be challenged, especially in the higher difficulties that you should play. The normal difficulty is still easy enough. Play like higher difficulties. There are actually 5 difficulty levels. Play in on the last 2 difficulties if you want any challenge, and if you are nearly good enough with the shooter games. I was bad. I'm bad at shooter games, and I played with the normal difficulty, and it was pretty easy for me to play with the higher difficulties. And overall, the gameplay is good. Yes, my friends. Overall, in the year 2020, if you go and purchase the game on the Steam, it is actually worth to play. I know it sounds pretty weird coming after this again, after all the things that I talked, but I highly recommend you to go and get the game because you will find a lot of fun here. You will find a lot of fun, especially with the Steam. Right now, Mass Effect Andromeda actually costs around $30, and at the moment of the recording of the video, it's $15 on Steam, and it is every bit worth it to buy this game for $15. Maybe even for $20, it's still worth it, because you're gonna have a lot of time in this game. It took me around 20 to 30 hours to go through an entire of the main story, but just because I was actually spending quite a lot of times on the side quests, on the planetary exploration as well. But you can get up to 50 hours maybe from this game, and for $20, 50 hours of the gameplay is pretty good, and you'll actually enjoy the game overall. Even though the story is very cliched, you'll still feel like it's something filler of the Mass Effect until the next one will come out. But will next Mass Effect actually come out? It's actually very difficult to predict, because now let's decide what killed Mass Effect universe, Mass Effect franchise. Was it this game, was it the publisher, or was it actually the players? And I think it's a bit of the both, or no, a bit, and I think every single one of the parties are to blame for this one. The game, because it was not up to par for the level of the Mass Effect franchise was. The publisher, which was to blame that it was not on par, and which pushed the game way too quickly and killed the game way too quickly as well. And the players that expected way too much from the game and from the publisher and just got burned because of it. The players like me who got burned because of this. Overall, all of us are to blame, and I'm really excited for the Mass Effect remastered trilogy and what it will do for the Mass Effect universe in itself, because I really feel like that it's not the last time when we heard of the Mass Effect, and I really hope the future for the Mass Effect universe will exist, and I especially hope that it will be brighter than ever. Well, this will be it for today. This was probably my longest video ever recorded. I hope I did not bore you with my talk, and overall, yes, the game is worth it, so buy it if you like Mass Effect universe more or less, and if you just want an RPG that's pretty good RPG, then it's especially worth to buy, especially for the $20. This will be it for today. Thank you for being here with me. Like the video if you liked it, subscribe if you want more videos like this one, and I'm gonna see you in the next one. See ya.